Hi Tim, thanks for having us. Welcome everyone, and it's great to be here on ShareCafe. A little bit about who we are. iCollege is a leading vocational provider of skills and training across Australia, with 8 campuses around the country and presence in 5 of the 8 states and territories. We have a fairly tight board. We have a non-executive chairman, Simon Tolhurst, who's also the litigation partner at Ebsworth in Brisbane, and a great legal mind. Ash Katter is our managing director. Ash has got many years' experience in skills and vocational training in Australia, and has lived through the last 15, 20 years of vocational training, including vet fee help and exiting that and moving into the international student space. Badri Ghasavi. Badri is a bit of a serial entrepreneur, but has had great successes with a number of restaurants. He's a qualified accountant and in finance, and doing a great job as our CFO as well as an exec director. Next slide, please. Just want to take everyone through the capital structure now as it stands. We currently have 581,564,649 shares on offer. The board and management hold 14.7%, and the top 20 holders hold about 51% at the moment still. We've got 22 million options, 10 of them at 5 cents expiring in June 23, and 12 million at 15 cents expiring in November 23. Next slide. iCollege is really interestingly placed. We've got 2 very distinct cohorts of students. We have domestic students, which are school leavers and job seekers here in Australia, Australian citizens or permanent residents. And they often get to access training at either free or very low fee cost to them, because it's funded under state and government contracts. Are unique again in that we have state funding contracts in 5 of the 8 states and territories, being Queensland, South Australia, ACT, New South Wales and WA. And we're constantly looking at expanding our scope in that position at the moment. We get paid for domestic students as they complete units of competency. So as they progress through a course, for example, aged care, which takes sort of about 6 weeks in the classroom and then 4 weeks of placement after, as they complete units of competency, we submit those to the government in whichever state or territory it is, and we're paid the following month. We are currently really aggressively expanding our domestic marketing campaigns to bring in more students, given that Australia is now suffering from a lack of immigration and lack of people to fill the shortfalls in the high demand areas like aged care, building and construction, and so on. Then we have the overseas students. Now, prior to COVID, we had about a 50-50 split, 50% international students and 50% domestic. That's now changed to 30% international and 70% domestic, and we expect that to kick up again once the borders here in Australia open. We have an allocation of 1,300 what we call Cricos places for international students, and we've currently got over 800 actively studying. So through COVID, we had an 85% retention rate of our international students. Many stayed here and have worked through the process. Now, the difference here is that all of these students are full fee paying. So they either make an upfront payment for their course, or alternatively, we agree a progressive payment plan that's paid on a monthly basis at the beginning of each month. The Federal Minister for Immigration recently announced that while students normally have to spend 2 years studying in Australia prior to being able to apply for additional visas to spend more time here, because of COVID, he's going to allow us to enrol them in their country of origin, start the training there, and any training they complete until our borders are open will count towards that 2-year period. We've seen that as a really exciting initiative, and we're currently bringing on marketing staff. We have marketing staff at the moment for Korea and Japan, with a view that they will probably be some of the earlier bubbles we see opening for students coming in. And we're then expanding that further into the Southeast Asian region, which again, we're betting is going to be one of the more likely bubbles coming in. Next slide. So our businesses, we have three very, very active registered training organisations here in Australia, and probably the flagship is Xero Institute, which has both domestic and international students, and it teaches hospitality, business, foundation skills, and that's a really interesting course. We actually deliver that course inside prisons and correctional facilities in Queensland. Very high completion rate with that. Community services, English language and information technology. And the IT side of things is around blockchain and advanced diploma of blockchain technology. Their offices, Brisbane, Gold Coast and Perth, and full training centres in all of those. Celtic Training is our business that focuses on healthcare and community services in Adelaide and on the Gold Coast. Capital Training Institute focused clearly on building and construction, where in order to have a building licence, you need to complete your diploma in building and construction. And we're seeing a lot of tradies coming in and doing that now. Tested is our English language testing company. Now, this is partnered with Cambridge Assessment English, where we have an exclusive agreement to sell and market the Linguist Skills Test, which is Cambridge's newest mid-stakes test, that allows us to deliver English language testing to individuals in their home, remotely proctored, so the computer monitors the security of the test and the integrity of the test, which has been a great boon through COVID, where we can no longer or haven't been able to get 40 people into a room to run a test. The hacking school, I'll speak probably a little bit more about later, but it is India's first boot camp coding training school. We acquired that towards the end of last year. We're just doing the transfer of title of the business in India at the moment. That's both domestic in India and international students. And here in Australia, we're now rolling it out under the Coding Factory. Along with that, we're rolling out a coding for kids for 6-year-olds to 14-year-olds, which is a fully gamified product online that they can get in and start to learn about coding. So we see this as a really scalable, really exciting market for us, and it's already getting quite a bit of traction from the broader public. Next slide. Our growth. Now, this is a really exciting slide from my perspective. Back in 2017, iCollege agreed to acquire Xero Institute and the associated companies. Back then, the market cap was 2.7 million. In October this year, it was 62.5, and today we're sitting at about 73 million market cap. We had 300 domestic students. We've now got over 2,000. We had no international students. Now it sits at over 800 across 8 campuses in the country, as opposed to 1 in Adelaide back then, and 80 plus staff. We now also have 60 course offerings. Now, all of these course offerings are in high demand, skill shortage areas. So we're really targeting to build a job ready workforce for Australia and providing the courses that allow that to happen. Our completion rates back then were at 60%. Today they're at 90%. And I mentioned earlier, we get paid for domestic students on completion and competency. So these completion rates are incredibly important, but they're also important for the international students who have a situation where they must prove progression through their course during their time here in Australia. They're required to attend the campus for 20 hours a week, and they're allowed to work for 20 hours a week. If they're not progressing through their course, it can certainly put their visas at risk. So completions and completion rates are incredibly important in that space as well. That's a really exciting slide for my money. If we can move to the next slide. Our FY21 performance is also a pretty exciting slide. You'll see record cash, record revenues, record EBITDA, and a strong start to FY21. The bottom, the growth rate back in 18, it was 2.7. We've seen year-on-year gains with FY21 at 4.1 versus 10.8 last year. Now, the half yearly last year, we announced a maiden EBITDA of about 700,000. We're well on target to produce an annual EBITDA, and then COVID came into play in March, and we had to roll out a COVID response plan, which saw us not completing students as quickly as we'd like to because they weren't able to come in and do the hands-on practical training. On the 16th of November, we actually announced an update to the market that said at the end of October, we had revenues year to date of 5.6 million with an unaudited EBITDA of 1.12. So by the end of October, at the end of the first 4 months of the year, we're past half of our revenue for last year. So again, a really exciting slide and something worth thinking about. Next slide, please. Through COVID, we saw a number of initiatives from the federal government, and the first one worth mentioning is Job Trainer. So the federal government annually already provide funds to the states and territories for vocational training. Job Trainer provides an additional $1 billion in funding. That equates to an additional 340,000 training places for free or very low fee courses targeted at school leavers and job keepers, and really designed to have this job-ready workforce that's in the Morrison Recovery Plan. Now, interestingly, and again, I want to go back to the fact that iCollege has state-funded training contracts in 5 of the 8 states and territories currently. We have the broadest footprint of any of our competitors on the ASX, and certainly of many RTOs in the country. We have the broadest footprint. So Job Trainer is administered through these state funding contracts, so we're very well positioned to take a hold of this. Next slide. This is just a quick snapshot of the additional spaces, and I think it's really important to note that they're additional to what normally happens in each of the states and territories that we currently hold funding contracts. Next slide. During COVID, the federal government, and it was driven by Senator Macaulay-Cash, came up with an infection control training fund of $80 million designed to train 80,000 Australians who were customer facing during the pandemic and post the pandemic. Now, we saw this as a great opportunity and started to, well, we built the training model. Now, a skill set is a smaller unit of competency that comes out of a much larger qualification generally. So we've developed this training so it can be delivered either face-to-face or online. And the range of payments across the states and territories, again, that we're funded in is between $291 and $620 for each worker that undergoes the training. There are different specifications around the state, and state governments are handing out the funding on an as-you-go basis. As you complete and utilise funding, you can reapply. We've had some really very important outcomes in this particular training. And recently we announced a signed letter of intent with Aegis Aged Care. Aegis are the largest aged care provider in WA. They're very mindful of what's happened in other parts of the country with aged care, and they're looking to upskill the already very positive qualifications of their existing 3,300 staff across 27 facilities in South Australia. So we're just now working through the rollout plan of that with them. Additionally, we've started training and completed about 200 of the drivers for a significant cab company in Canberra. And very early in the piece, we worked with the Pharmacy Guild. Now, this was incredibly important. The Pharmacy Guild are a great peak body for over 5,800 pharmacies around the country. What we were finding was that people were, and in Victoria particularly, people were going to the pharmacy over and above going to the doctor to try and get some advice. So the Pharmacy Guild said, this is really important for our people. We need to make sure that they have the right school tools and skills to make sure they can do their job properly in this difficult environment that everyone was facing. We've started that rollout now. We're seeing a consistent take up of the training, both online and face-to-face with the Guild as well. Interestingly, we were very fortunate with the first face-to-face course we ran very early November, that we had the Senator come along and be incredibly supportive of this course. She was delighted at the fact that she got to be hands-on and see the training that never before had they managed to do so quickly. All the states and territories coming together, supporting the federal government and rolling out a funded skill set within a couple of weeks of initial conversations. Next slide. So in closing, I think one of the really important things to mention here is that during October, we completed a placement that was significantly oversubscribed. So we placed 5.5 million, which was at 10 cents. Now that's allowing us to do great things with the business and really fast track some things. We're targeting to continue the strong organic growth that you've seen in the previous slides. We're going to continue to focus on high demand skill shortage areas. It's something we've proven we do really well, and we're going to keep doing it. Further geographical expansion into new training markets. And again, as I said, 5 of the 8, I suspect we'll very quickly see 6 of 8 states with us with funding contracts. We're going to focus on those offshore commencements that I talked about now that we have the opportunity. And then when the borders open, what we'll see is that rebalancing of domestic and international, but at higher levels than it was before. We're definitely on target to post a very strong maiden annual EBITDA for FY 2021, and I, for one, am really excited to see that in June next year. And we're looking at significant accretive acquisition opportunities. There are 2 of those at the moment that we've lifted the bonnet on, and we're looking under the engine. So that's a bit of a snapshot on where iCollege is today, but just to quote Ash Katter in the announcement around our performance at the end of October, iCollege is in excellent shape.
And on that note, I'll come in. Thanks, Stuart. We're actually out of time. I've got a couple of questions, and I've got the jackhammers about to rip in the footpath outside. He just rang the doorbell. So what percentage of the students that you have are online or have to be physically present?
The majority have to be physically present. With things like infection control, that can be delivered online. What we did during COVID is we took everyone online and we delivered the theory components of the course online. Then, for example, with commercial cookery, they have to come in and they have to demonstrate the competencies in the kitchen. Same with aged care. At the end of their theory component, they go and they spend 4 weeks in an aged care facility demonstrating the skills before we can issue the certification.
Understood. And there's a lot of competition in this space. Do you see a lot more consolidation playing out?
I think so. I think there are a lot of organisations who have done it very, very tough through COVID, and we did as well. So, a lot of the smaller RTOs who had to go online, didn't have the capacity to go online, have those funding contracts, have facilities and everything else, who have been shut down for a long period of time. I think there are some fabulous opportunities out there for us at this point in time.
And a question here on, government initiatives to support private sector education. The programs have kind of had a checkered history. What's different now?
Oh, look, there's a lot different now. I mean, if we look at the checkered history of a number of years ago, and I assume we're referring to Bedford Hill, that was all closed down. There was a new process put into place called vet student loans. That's completely different to the state government funding contracts that I'm talking about at this point in time. And in fact, iCollege isn't engaged with vet student loans at this point in time. So we will look. Scott Morrison's alluded to the fact that he'd like to see some changes to that, and we'll just wait and see what happens. And if they're good changes, which I suspect they might be, we'll look to get very heavily involved.